You ever have a dream about a familiar place or familiar people, but then you wake up and you realize you've never been to that place before. You've never met any of those people. It was all just your imagination, a trick your mind played on you while you were sleeping. That's a little bit what it feels like to play Disillusion. It's got all the familiar mechanics of a typical RPG. Turn-based battles, NPCs, merchants. But that recognizable feeling starts to wear away as you sink deeper and deeper into its world. It has a hypnotic, disorienting quality to it as you wander maze-like hallways decorated with clashing colors and patterns while listening to a wild, experimental soundtrack that adds to the already thick, dreamlike atmosphere. Along the way, you participate in strange conversations with even stranger-looking beings about everything from Vedic philosophies to the contents of a PB&J sandwich. Spoiler, it's not what you think. Disillusion is one of those games. You know the ones. The ones that are arty and confounding, surreal and obtuse. There are a lot of those out there, but, Disillusion never forgets it's still a game. There's a clear progression and an underlying structure that holds it all together. And it's going to be an experience that you either embrace without question or run as far away as you can from, clawing at your eyes and screaming for it to stop. So let's begin our ascent into Disillusion. At its heart, Disillusion is a dungeon crawler RPG, laced with a healthy dose of surrealism, along with various religious and philosophical themes. It was released in 2021 and developed by one person, who goes by Disillusion Dev on Steam. Before we dig in any further, I want to give a special thanks to these dungeon connoisseurs and dungeon architects who support me on Patreon. If you'd like to support this channel, click on the Patreon link in the description below. Now, back to the game. In Disillusion, you take the role of Golem. Fuck, I meant golem. But yeah, for those who don't know, a golem is actually something pretty specific. And since this game is wrapped up in a lot of philosophy and religion, pretty sure that in this instance the golem you play as is meant to be either a literal or metaphorical one from actual Jewish folklore. Golems were creatures made of clay and brought to life by holy men. They couldn't speak, had no souls, and could only follow orders. In Hebrew, the word golem is usually translated as unshaped form or stupid person. So that's what you are in Disillusion, an unshaped, stupid person who doesn't know anything. So let's get going, dummy. Your goal in Disillusion, essentially, is to ascend a tower. You start in a happy and quiet town, and you're told you need to arm yourself before entering the tower. In a shady home, you'll meet a creature that will give you a butter knife. This is your first weapon, which seems a bit shit, but it's actually enough to enter the tower with. But there are two more places to check out in the happy and quiet town. You can visit the wall, but all you'll find is a small hole with a tiny being inside who tells you to leave them alone. Then there's the town hall, but right now nobody's there. So all that's left is to enter the large tower in the distance. In the starting room, you'll meet a few characters. The first you'll likely talk to is a giant cat who gives you a pair of socks, and those are leg armor, by the way. There's also some tall, deformed green people, all named Evan James Miracle. There's a green virus-looking thing called a hob, and this trollish creature who calls himself Sunflower Boy, but who turns out to be a hob in disguise. And you'll meet a lot of other weird things during your climb. The characters and enemy designs are really bizarre and sometimes unsettling, but they all fit perfectly into this strange world. You'll also run into a lone crow on the first floor who just caws at you when you try to speak to it. But yeah, it's just a crow. Nothing out of the ordinary there. Well, on to the second floor. As you wander here, you'll trigger a cutscene and meet a girl who pops out from around a corner. And this cutscene, with the music that's playing and the playful way that she's introduced, it just really struck me. I don't know, there's something very poignant about this meeting. And of course there is, she's an important character. But yeah, it just really nailed a kind of forlorn feeling that's hard to put into words. It's playful and sad at the same time. But anyway, this is Melpomene. Now, you find this out later, but for those of you who are up on your Greek mythology, you'll know that Melpomene is the name of one of the 9 muses. The muse of tragedy, to be specific. She explains that most people can't see her, but you can, which leads her to believe that your head must be pretty messed up. So we learn that you, Golem, are not only an unshaped, stupid person, but you have some mental issues as well. Now, Melpomene, Mel for short, is currently investigating the tower. Apparently the people who enter here keep disappearing, and she wants to find out why. But she also wants to keep her investigation a secret, because her sisters, the other muses, wouldn't be happy if they found out she's here. It's a bit of a messing with the natural order kind of situation. Mel asks to accompany you on your journey through the tower. You can choose to say yes or no, but she's coming with you no matter what. So Mel becomes your companion. Disillusion has a very clear and recognizable gameplay loop at its center. You control a single character, fight turn-based battles, gain experience from defeated enemies, and level up, which increases your stats. You can attack, use special abilities, use items to heal, and cast magic spells. There are no random encounters in Disillusion. Every NPC and enemy can be seen and interacted with. Some will just want to fight you, so they'll say something to you and then a battle will begin, and you don't have any choice on the matter. But others can be spoken with, and you'll have dialogue options. So there are some fights that can be avoided by choosing the right answer. Other times an NPC will teach you a new skill or spell. Other NPCs will take you to new places, either within or outside of the tower. And as you climb to different floors and talk to other characters and make choices, sometimes Mel pops up and gives her opinion on things, telling you that she doesn't trust this person, or that you should help this one, or that visiting this area is a waste of time. You can follow Mel's advice, or ignore it, and some of these choices will affect what ending you receive. But I'll talk more about those later. For now, what's important to know is that many of your choices and actions affect things down the line. Through speaking to these other characters, you'll learn that everyone who enters here climbs the tower. It's just what you do. But some of these creatures have a sardonic tone when speaking about the tower and the purpose of climbing it, so already things feel a bit off-kilter. You know, if the music, character designs, and backgrounds weren't enough to tip you off. The visuals in Disillusion are very simple. You're just wandering through corridors for the most part, but there are some areas where you're transported outside of the tower, and you can see the sky, like this Japanese-style town, or this place that has this psychedelic pastiche bursting from above. I was always interested to see what the next level of the tower was going to look like, or where the next teleporter was going to take me. The influence from LSD Dream Emulator is on full display in the clashing colors and use of repeating patterns on walls and floors. A lot of the walls usually have distorted faces or illegible text and other flourishes to them. And other places even have some visual effects, like this weird area that you'll find yourself in if you approach this house that gives you an overwhelming sense of dread. Inside are black and white distorted versions of characters you've met before, who only speak in Morse code, and it's raining. And you can use a Morse code translator to find out what all these characters are saying and what their names are. There are also some adventure game elements in between floors. You'll have these weird dreamlike visions that may be your own or may be someone else's. Here you'll choose which direction to turn through rainy streets, or whether to enter a tunnel or duck into a forest. These lead to different outcomes. There's also a hidden library, which has some bookshelves that reveal more about the game world and backstory of Mel and her sisters. But it's hidden within a secret. And then the library itself is a huge maze. And when I say huge, I mean freaking huge. Someone on Steam tried to make a map, and the dev told them they'd only mapped out about 60% of it because they'd missed some invisible walls. So if you're the type of person who likes mazes or likes to secret hunt, Disillusion has a lot of depth. You get used to these kinds of unconventional styles as you continue playing, but sometimes the designs can be a bit hard on the eyes. I had trouble looking at the B area, with its white walls with just images of leaves on them. It was difficult to see different paths, and yeah, I don't know, I just had to use eye drops to get through this area. But for the most part, I like the way Disillusion looks. Going hand in hand with the visuals is the absolutely incredible music. It does so much to reinforce the mood of the game. There are some very relaxing tracks, like the quiet piece with the gentle static of an old record player that's the background to the second floor where you meet Mel. Then there's the jazzy, Muzak-inspired track on the third and fourth floors with its occasional creepy strings that wriggle in. There's some psychedelic ambient pieces, as well as darker stuff too. This song that plays when you find the hospital area is really unsettling, not helped by the fact that you're in a hospital with rows of beds and IVs and monitors and blood stains on the walls and floors. And one of the doors leads to a room with some kind of demonic ritual altar. There's also one that plays a couple floors later that has a distorted voice of a woman reading some kind of children's tale about hibernating in the winter. The most unsettling track, though, is the one that plays in the rainy world that I mentioned earlier. It's a minimalistic piece with a low-pitched, modulated voice that's singing, cut with other vocal effects and a dark drone. These tracks, even the more calming ones, also don't loop properly. So as you're exploring, the songs will end, and you're left with silence for a few seconds as it starts up again. This seems to be completely intentional, and just another way of throwing off the player and unsettling them. I can't overstate how much the music adds to the experience of playing this game. It just wouldn't be the same without it. As you continue to climb the tower, you learn that it's called samsara, and is a passageway for souls to break the karmic cycle and reach nirvana. And I think it's about time to break down some Vedic philosophy here. And we're not going to get too heavy into this because I'm no expert. Hell, all I did was go to Wikipedia to look some of this stuff up as I ran across it while playing the game. So this is an idiot's guide made by an idiot. And if you're more knowledgeable on this and you notice I got anything wrong, just let me know in the comments. First off, Vedic refers to the Vedas, which are a collection of religious texts from ancient India, related to Hinduism. Samsara is a Sanskrit word that means wandering or world, depending on the context. But its meaning actually refers to a cycle of change. So when we're talking about karma, which Disillusion has already mentioned, we're talking about the cycle of death and rebirth. This also relates to reincarnation. You wander aimlessly through a mundane existence, dying and being reborn, and the goal of all this wandering is to break the cycle and reach enlightenment, commonly known as nirvana, but there are other words that mean the same thing. Obviously, there's a lot more to this, but for the purposes of talking about this relatively short, surreal dungeon crawler RPG, we'll leave it at that. You and the other souls are supposed to climb this tower, called samsara, and break the karmic cycle to reach nirvana. Now, the problem is, the souls that enter aren't leaving and are getting lost inside. Again, this is why Mel is investigating. As you climb the tower and talk to more people and beings, you learn that Mara, the goddess of death, has built a prison on top of the tower and is capturing souls there. So your quest becomes to stop Mara so that you and the other souls can finally leave. But as Mel reveals, the problem that Gollum has is his mind is so fractured that he's actually outside of the karmic cycle and will never reach nirvana. So your journey becomes kind of a selfless thing as you try to save all these other people. But there are multiple endings, and a lot of other things that can happen both within the tower and outside of it that can affect your journey. There are 4 endings in the game, so this is a good time for a spoiler warning, because I'm going to talk about these a bit. So if you don't want anything spoiled, skip to this time. I think it's best to go into things blind and just bumble around figuring things out, but, you know, to each their own. Anyway, yeah, so if you just play through the game normally, not really worrying about who you're talking to or how many side quests you're doing, you'll reach a point where Mel can't go on anymore. She stops to rest and leaves you to ascend to the top floor of the tower. At the top, you'll find the Bodhi tree, which is the tree that the Buddha sat under to reach enlightenment. The tree is currently surrounded by a prison that Mara has created, and she speaks to you, telling you that you have uncontrollable personality, thinking, memory, and perception. Therefore, you can't reach nirvana, and you're just bothering her. She makes you an offer, though. She can cure you and unite the uncontrollable parts of your psyche, though that still won't let you reach nirvana. You'll just be able to live outside of samsara. You'll become a deva, basically a god, free from the cycle of death and rebirth. You can then choose to accept or decline the offer. If you accept, the Bodhi tree dies, the tower collapses, and everything around it becomes a swamp. Mara then proclaims that you will be her son, who will judge the living and the dead before and after their bodily resurrection. You and Mara have destroyed fate, and now you are the masters of karma. Basically, you become Death's bitch. On the other hand, you can refuse the offer and fight Mara, and after defeating her, dependent origination is restored. This is basically the Buddhist concept of fate and causality, though it's not exactly the same. Again, anyone who knows more about these themes and concepts, feel free to comment. But anyway, this is restored, and the karmic cycle begins again. This is gonna sound like nonsense, but in the playthrough where I refused the offer and defeated Mara, I'd found a horse in a forest in somebody's memories, somewhere along the way through the tower. And so at the end, Golem finds that horse again and watches the sunrise. I'm not sure if this scene happens if you don't find the horse. So there might be other variations on this ending. But those are two of the endings, and both of them aren't that great in terms of the overall story. I mean, after defeating Mara, the text says you feel a warmth fall over you, a gratitude of millions of souls barely satisfied. They all watch one being cry. It doesn't really sound like a happy ending. But there are other endings. You remember that crow on the first floor, right? Yeah, that normal-looking crow who just cawed at you. Well, as you climb the tower, you'll run into many more crows, all of whom just do the same thing at you if you try to speak to them. Mel tells you early on, though, that the crows are meant to be respected. Okay, so fine. But they still just caw at you and don't give you any dialogue options or anything. But there's a way to talk to the crows. In the hospital area, you'll find an NPC named Chi. They look like a Sphinx cat. Perfect choice of breed there, considering everything else in the game. Speaking to them here triggers a series of events, even though it doesn't really seem like it. By finding a specific teleporter a few floors up, you'll be transported to a classroom where Chi is standing at the lectern. If you talk to them there, they'll mention the crows, and choosing the correct dialogue options in this conversation will lead to Chi giving you a coin that allows you to understand what the crows are saying. They mostly just berate you for being a stupid, lesser creature, so this seems like a waste, at first. Now, the next steps get a bit fuzzy, and I've read conflicting reports in messages and comments online, and I'm not really sure what I did to get this to work, but I think you have to find Chi 2 more times, and then you'll be able to meet the Crow Lord. Now, the Crow Lord is the original god of the world. That's right, before there was anything else, there were crows, at least according to them. And the Crow Lord reveals that the reason Golem is outside the karmic cycle is actually because of Mel. She's the muse of tragedy, after all. So for Golem to return to the karmic cycle, you have to kill Mel. Mel's actually quite upset that she caused you so much strife, and willingly dies, on the condition that you go on to defeat Mara. So when you reach the top of the tower and fight Mara, afterwards you'll be able to be reborn or reach Nirvana. And apparently there's another ending, where Mel goes on to defeat Mara after killing you, but I have no idea how to get that ending. Sorry, I played through the game 3 times, and I couldn't figure out what you need to do to get that to happen. There are also a lot of other elements and side quests that I don't really understand, like that demonic altar in the hospital that I found. Later on, I met an NPC who mentioned a golden pig, and interacting with the altar talks about bringing a pig there. There's also an achievement for finding the golden pig, but I couldn't find it. Oh yeah, and that PB&J sandwich stands for pork rinds, bean, and jelly sandwich. And no, I'm not going to make that and try to eat it. But if you want to see someone do that, check out SomaSpice's video on this game. I'll link it in the description. Their video is also what tipped me off to the 2 other endings in the game. There's just so much mystery to Disillusion still, and I want more people to play it so that it develops a bigger community, so that more people can dig into it. There's a forum called Agora Road's Macintosh Cafe, the best kept secret of the internet apparently. It has a small community there focused on Disillusion. The dev usually pops up from time to time too. I'll admit, I didn't actively participate in any discussions, but I read some of the threads and found some helpful hints about the game. You can also find a download for the demo of the sequel the dev is currently working on, Disillusion ST. I tried it out, and may as well talk about it a bit here. The sequel uses a new engine and has more 3D elements, such as some characters and backgrounds. There's also a whole new lighting system. It overall seems much darker, not only in the visuals, but in the themes as well. You're exploring Naraka this time, which is the Hindu equivalent of hell. Many of the NPCs are suffering or being tormented in some way. The game still has you exploring grid-based style, but this time around there are no battles or RPG elements. It has more of an adventure game style to its gameplay. The sequel also uses procedural generation for some of its elements, like NPC placement and exits and teleporters within the levels. It's a much more free-form style of game. Apparently the demo has 70 levels completed, with a total of 150 planned, at least according to a recent post from the dev. Disillusion ST definitely takes more structural inspiration from LSD and Eastern Mind, as opposed to the dungeon crawler approach the original game used. It seems really ambitious, so it's going to be fun to see how it evolves as work continues on it. And yeah, so that's Disillusion. There's so much more that I could mention, but I think more people should experience the game for themselves. It's available on Steam for $2.99 USD, so there's no reason not to try it out if it looks even remotely interesting to you. And I'll put a link to the sequel demo download in the description too, so you can try that out if you want. But yeah, that's it for this video. As always, hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can find a link to my Twitter, or X, or whatever the hell it's called nowadays, and a link to my Patreon in the description too. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next video. So, Disillusion, check it out. Dungeon Chill, out.